Hey folks, Keith Stickley here with the Stickley Law Firm in Hillsdale, Michigan. We're here in our new office and just got out of court for the day. And after court, a lot of times I like to make videos that explain frequently asked legal questions that come up and we hear all the time. And sometimes I think it's helpful if I just get on camera and explain some of these things for people that might have a legal issue, such as drinking and driving, which is going to be our subject of conversation this afternoon. I know maybe not a really thrilling thing, but maybe you or somebody that you really care about has recently been arrested for a drinking and driving based offense and has been told that they've lost their driver's license. And I want to go over a couple of the ways that you can get your driver's license back if you have been told or you think that you are going to lose your driver's license. So I'm going to pull up a little chair here and we will dig into what we need to do once we have been, let's assume that we've been charged and then convicted of drinking and driving. Now, it's really important to remember before we talk about these actual things here that just because you got pulled over for drinking and driving doesn't mean you're in fact guilty. There's a lot that goes into defending drinking and driving cases. It's something that we deal with quite a bit here all over Southwest Michigan. But so a lot of this stuff that we're going to talk about today kind of comes after that fact. So I think we have another video on actually what happens, sort of the anatomy of a drinking and driving case and what happens once you're pulled over for drinking and driving and how those cases work. But I want to talk about how we can get our driver's license back if we have been told that through a letter from the Secretary of State, generally that's how it happens, that we do not have a driver's license. And in order to do that, in order to jump into that conversation, I want to address what usually happens, probably the number one reason that people get their driver's license taken away. And sometimes it has nothing to do with if they're guilty of drinking and driving or not. So Michigan's got this funny law. It's called the implied consent law. And basically what that means is if you have a driver's license in the state of Michigan, you are consenting to what's called a chemical test, okay? You're pre-consenting. When you get your driver's license, you're pre-consenting to this thing called a chemical test. And the chemical test basically says after you're arrested for drinking and driving, they have the right to get a blood alcohol content test. Now, in the past, this was often done with a machine at the jail, not to be confused with the machine at the side of the road. That's a PBT. That's totally different, okay? And let's actually address that real quick, because it is a common misconception that you have to blow into the little machine at the side of the road, okay? That's a PBT, and it's not required. If you don't blow into that, you might have to pay a civil fine, but that's not a criminal charge. The chemical test is a different thing. That is, it's a lot more, well, in theory, it's supposed to be a lot more accurate. But for a long time, it was done by a funny machine at the jail that was often called a data master. And the data master was similar to a PBT, but it was kind of a big giant machine and it was supposed to be more accurate and went through all this calibration and all these things, okay? And similar devices still are in use today. So if you get arrested for a drinking and driving offense, you probably wonder why they want you to come and do this, blow into this big machine at the jail, and that's the chemical test. The other way to get more accurate, if you want to, and there's a lot of science behind that. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today because there's some really, really questionable things about this as well. But they also have the option of drawing blood, doing a blood test, and in general, the blood test probably, in my experience, is quite a bit more accurate. And you have to submit to that. If you don't submit to either the chemical test, the chemical breath test, or the blood test when you're booked, then they can get a warrant, basically a search warrant for your blood. And they literally, when I say they, the arresting agency, the police station or whatever, they'll literally call up a judge or a magistrate, even if it's 3 a.m, and they will request a warrant based on the probable cause of you being drunk. And at that point, they're going to take your blood, or you're going to blow into the thing, or you're going to have way worse problems. If you refuse that, if you refuse the chemical test, the blood draw or whatever, your driver's license can be suspended automatically for a year. Now, if you refuse that, the police officers fill out a form that says at the top, refusal of chemical test. okay? And there's this little warning on the bottom that hardly anybody reads, especially if they are unfortunately intoxicated. And it's a 14-day notice to appeal. You have 14 days from the time that you were handed that piece of paper to turn in that piece of paper, all right, to the, basically it'll end up going to the circuit court, and protesting that reason. Now, I've actually successfully defended people who have been given these 14-day notices, because one of the things you do when you're defending these drunk driving cases is you actually, if you have a decent attorney anyway, you actually have to watch all the video if there's video. And a lot of times people don't actually refuse, but the cops say that they do, and this is a big problem. This is why I need a good lawyer. But getting ahead of all that, let's assume you actually do refuse it, like you're just not thinking and you don't understand it and you don't remember that, whatever. A lot of these things are emotionally charged moments, right? And so you don't, you refuse the chemical test. Then they get the warrant. Now you got some problems. All right, what do we do? Well, number one, you can try and fight it, okay? And I recommend you do. That's number one. But number two, a lot of people don't realize they only have 14 days and too much time goes by. And a judge is often not very likely to say, oh, we excuse the 14-day time limit. We'll let you explain, you plead your case. Basically, the Secretary of State, not the court, the Secretary of State suspends your license for a year. You could even be found innocent and still have the suspension because you didn't comply with our goofy stuff. So what do we do? What do we do? What is the quickest way to get our driver's license back? The quickest way is not available in all jurisdictions, and that is the bummer. But it's in a growing number of jurisdictions, quite a few, and that is a thing called sobriety court. Or sometimes it's called DUI court or drinking and driving court, but formally it's called sobriety court. And what sobriety court is a specialty court program where a judge takes a group of people who have been convicted of a drinking and driving offense, and basically, most often, they hold a weekly or a monthly, they're usually weekly though, monthly meeting of all the people in this group, okay? So it might be 25 people who have been convicted of drinking and driving. And the judge checks in with them, and they talk about sobriety. And it becomes part, it's also referred to as sort of an intensive probation, because it's everybody that's convicted, they're on probation, and they talk about their sobriety. And in theory, the sobriety court is supposed to help coordinate resources, alcohol support groups if they need, mental assistance, and there's accountability, and everybody talks about not drinking. They're there to support one another. This thing is not really for everybody. I'm not going to lie. Some people don't really like the process. It's a little too much like AA and that kind of thing. But sobriety courts come with a giant bonus. And what is that bonus? That is the chance, that is the court where a judge, a district court judge, is able to reinstate your driver's license regardless of what the Secretary of State thinks or says or sees. And this is extremely powerful for some people. Now, I did say that this is the simplest way to get your driver's license back after it might be, revoked or taken away after a drinking and driving offense. I didn't say it's the easiest. I said it's the simplest. It's very easy. It's very simple, right? You got to do sobriety court and do the things. That doesn't mean that doing the things is easy. Working on sobriety is hard as hell. And I give so much credit to people who are really willing and able to put the work in, stop drinking if it's become a problem in their life, and move forward. And it's really an awesome thing when I see clients that go through the process. Their life just ends up better. But that being said, here's what happens. So if you don't have a driver's license, but you got to get to work, you got to get to school, take care of your kids, you got to go to the doctor, whatever, the presiding judge over sobriety court can actually reissue you your driver's license. They can't do that in any other scenario, but they can here. And it's really powerful. Now, there's a couple limitations that usually come with it, okay? Number one, the county that you're in has to have a sobriety court. And most in Southwest Michigan, we're in Hillsdale. I serve all over the state. I serve clients all over the state, but I'm mainly concentrated Branch County, Hillsdale County. We do some Lenawee, Jackson, Calhoun, but so you got to make sure that they have a problem, and an attorney will know whether or not that county has a sobriety court if they do enough of these cases. So if your attorney doesn't know if your county has a sobriety court, you might want to pick a different attorney. If they do have a sobriety court, you're going to want your attorney to start doing the processes to get you in. A lot of times you have to apply to get into the sobriety court. The sobriety court's looking for people that have significant needs, right? They abuse alcohol, and sometimes they will direct you to get what's called a substance abuse assessment in order to see if you qualify for their program. So if you get into the sobriety court, which is usually not that difficult, but if you can get in and you need your driver's license, you usually have to serve a minimum 45-day driver's license suspension. So from the time that it's suspended, you got to wait 45 days. And on that 45th day, if you're in sobriety court, the judge can basically order the Secretary of State to reinstate your driver's license. There's a couple cool things about this process too. I've had a couple clients that have their driver's license has expired before they even got pulled over. So they're riding dirty. They don't have a driver's license. It's expired. Or I'm trying to think, was that one riding dirty? I might have had one. It might have expired after the suspension. Don't quote me on that, but I do these quite a bit, so it's hard to keep them all straight. But regardless, they were in sobriety court and their driver's license was expired. And they were concerned that they weren't going to be able to give the judge to give them a driver's license because, well, it was expired, right? And how do you unexpire your driver's license if you're not supposed to drive because you got this drinking and driving? Well, the cool part is if the judge orders the Secretary of State to give you the restricted license so you can drive because you're participating in sobriety court, you can actually get your driver's license renewed. And this is really, really cool. The judge sends in the order, and then after the judge sends in the order, you go to the Secretary of State and you can renew your license, and they will give it to you. And if you comply with all the restrictions and such, you're going to be driving. That's the way to do it. It's now some people don't want a sobriety court because they don't want to sit around and maybe talk to their problems or address needs, or they don't think they have a problem, and maybe they don't. Like I said, it's not for everybody. It's the simplest way. It's not the easiest way. Now, the Secretary of State and the state of Michigan actually put together kind of some frequently asked questions that I want to go over because these are frequently the questions that I get asked over and over and over again. So let's go through this thing. So the biggest number one question when somebody calls me and we work through their DUI case and we got a successful completion, but a lot of times maybe they're on like some sort of probation. We're able to keep a lot of people out of jail and all that kind of stuff. They say, well, hey, how am I eligible? Well, the big eligibility criteria is pretty simple, right? Your conviction has to be after 2011. That's about it. And you have to be approved and accepted into the court sobriety program. So who can authorize a restricted license is another question. Of course, I've already addressed that. The judge can. The judge that's in charge of the sobriety court can actually do that. So a lot of people wonder, well, if I'm in sobriety court, how does the judge, how do I get my restricted license? The court themselves have a mechanism to communicate with the Secretary of State, usually digitally, and that's how that works. So the court sends over the information the Secretary of State knows, and a lot of times it's pretty crazy. The Secretary of State will just literally mail you the license. So that's kind of cool. I think I mentioned before too, a lot of people say, well, how fast can you get me my license? That's like the number one thing. How fast can you get my license? The fastest I can get you your license is 45 days after it was restricted. You got to get into sobriety court. Now, sometimes for a lot of my clients, I really have to push the envelope because a lot of DUI cases take longer than 45 days. And that can present a really big hardship. So regardless if you use our firm or any other attorney, you really kind of got to be a stickler and stay on them and see if they can get you into court. If there is going to be like a plea, if you are going to accept responsibility, you want it to happen as soon as possible. Now, don't come after me or whatever attorney you hire if 45 days isn't just possible. We are at the mercy of the court, so sometimes it's literally not possible. But I always do everything I can for my clients to try to get them through that as quick as possible because I know what a hardship it is. A couple of the limitations on this. Once you have your restricted license, can you just drive around? Well, there's a little caveat to it. You've probably heard of an interlock system. An interlock system is a little device that gets installed in the car that you're going to drive, and you probably have to blow in it in order for the car to start. That is when you do the long form, which I think I'll probably make another video of. When you let's say that you've had a revoked driver's license for 1,000,000 years. To get your license back in that situation, you have to go in front of a driver's appeal board. And a lot of times that restricted license, they make you have an interlock. Well, this is kind of similar. They make you put this little device in and you blow in the car. These devices actually they're much easier to use than they used to be, and they're a lot more reliable. The technology's come a long way. But you got to be careful with the things because there is a camera on board. You really can't scam these. They're GPS. They got GPS chips in them and they got cameras in them. And every time you use it, it takes a photo. It instantly transmits it to the interlock device company. So the old days of, blowing up a balloon, having a sober person blow up a balloon and try to see if you can put the air into the interlock system or, have your spouse or your significant other here blow on this thing. So I start the car, that kind of stuff's over. And I tell you, I've actually seen somebody, this blows my mind. I've actually seen people try and fool these things and they got a camera on it. Don't do it. It's not worth it. If you slip up, the number one rule in all these sobriety courts, by the way, if you slip up or you have a relapse, is you go be honest. Because when you're honest in sobriety court, you almost never get punished. They just give you some extra help because that's really all you need. So that's very important. So what happens if you successfully complete the sobriety court? Can you just go driving on your own? So you have to stay on restricted license, okay, until the administrative panel gives you a free license. That's with the Department of State, the Secretary of State. So it's important to stay in touch with your attorney. A lot of our clients come in, they get through sobriety court. Some that do really well, it goes pretty quick. And they still have some licensing issues that would normally keep them suspended. So we have to assemble a packet and go through a process so they can get an unrestricted driver's license. And that sometimes takes a little bit of work, but it's worth it. And by then, the cool part is you've usually developed enough of a track record, which you need to be able to prove to the state for about 6 months sobriety. Before they'll reinstate a license the old long form way that we'll talk about as well. So the nice thing is sobriety court is kind of almost like a DIY kit. It's a one-stop shop because you get all the tools and the documentation, everything you need to get a unrestricted through that generally. So you're going to stay restricted until you go through the formal panel. Another thing that we do, quite regularly, and it's not complicated. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. Another question that comes up a lot. I just have some notes here. Can I get my sobriety court restricted license back if you get kicked out of sobriety court? The answer is no. If you cannot successfully complete sobriety court and that probation, if you're kicked out for some reason, multiple violations, you're not participating, you're not engaged, no, they're going to kick you out. And when you get kicked out, your restricted driving license goes away. Can't drive, can't do anything. So if your intention is not to complete the program, it's probably best that you don't get involved because you're going to do a lot of work for nothing. It really is for people who are serious about their sobriety and getting a better place in life. So a lot of people say, how do I have to show proof, or how does this interlock ignition thing work? The interlock companies, and we work with a couple we can recommend. A lot of the sobriety courts also have a preferred vendor. They do all of that. So the sobriety court tells the Secretary of State, that the interlock device has been installed in the vehicle. They handle all that communication really efficiently now behind the scenes. So that's not something that you really have to worry about. So if you already have an interlock device. This is something that comes out. Hey, I already have an interlock on a car. You got to get it. You got to get that approved if you have to. So part of the problem with this restriction, and I'll tell you this freely, a lot of people they come to our office and they want to go into this because they actually have to professionally drive for work, and that unfortunately is a problem. You're not going to be able to be a driver for work. You're able to drive to work, but you can't necessarily be a driver for work. So you can't drive a taxi, you can't drive a school bus, you can't be a delivery service. As things come down, like I think that they're even putting restrictions now, as so many people have gone to definitely Uber, but DoorDash and like meal delivery services. A lot of people want to know if they can do that kind of work, and my understanding as of right now is that's highly frowned upon, and it's not allowed. Again, one of the frequently asked questions: what happens if I violate any terms of my sobriety court restricted license? So basically, you're on warning, right? So if you violate any of the terms of your sobriety court restricted license, like a new drunk driving arrest, that would be the worst. If you tamper with it, if you circumvent it, if you drive without an interlock, if you jump in somebody's car to drive it that doesn't have an interlock system in it and you get busted, that's a huge problem. You can only drive the car that has your interlock device in it. They'll terminate the restricted driver's license, and all the other revocations or denials will be in place. So that's really, really, really important. And finally, sort of the last piece of the puzzle that I sort of addressed as I'm jumping around, because it's a pretty in-depth topic, is how do I get my full driver's license privileges restored after I successfully completed the sobriety court program? You're going to go in front of the administrative hearing section, sort of like the driver's license board, if you will. Okay. And so you're gonna request a full copy of your driving record. You're gonna have some sobriety, support letters, and then you're gonna have a full hearing. And that's something that, and I'm not just saying this because it's something that we do. You're gonna want an attorney to go in there with you. Yes, there are people who have done it, pro per, in other words, on their own. But there are some serious ramifications if you mess anything up procedurally. And it's not worth it. You need a guy or gal that is really, really experienced in, going to these hearings and doing it. And it costs a lot of money, unfortunately, because there's a lot of time and there's a lot of detail involved. So that's it, guys. That is what I wanted to chat about today. It is possible, after your license has been terminated, after a drinking and driving offense, to get your driver's license back. It is a simple process. It's not always an easy process. But it's something that we can certainly assist you with if that's something that you need. Just contact us here at our Hillsdale office, the Stickley law firm, and we'll do our best. I'm sure you have other questions. I'm sure we have other concerns, and we help out as many people as we possibly can. Just give our office a call, and we'll try to clarify anything for you. So that's it for now. Stay safe, be well, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you again real soon.